All right, everybody, welcome, and thank you so much for coming. I am Rhonda Shrader, for the folks that I haven't met yet. I run the entrepreneurship program at Haas and do a bunch of other things, but I love founders. One of the things that we do is UC Launch, and Moses was co-chair of Launch for its inaugural year, and then the second year, he took second place and got some cash, but more importantly, got one of the judges to write one of his first checks.
Yeah.
Which was pretty cool.
That is very cool.
So instead of having a long introduction about Moses, you're going to get to know him tonight through some of the questions that we're going to ask. But basically, Xendit is Launch's first unicorn. It's Haas's latest unicorn, and it's a payment platform system throughout Southeast Asia.
Yeah, think Stripe, Southeast Asia.
Love it. Cool. So I want to go way, way back to when we first met in 2015, and you were going through Launch. So you were trying to solve a particular problem then at the beginning of Launch. And once you went out and did customer discovery, it was a different problem at the end. Can you tell us about that?
We had this thesis around Bitcoin remittance. We'd started with Berkeley versus Stanford hackathon that we beat Stanford on. And it was about sending money from, in 24 hours we built something that sent money from the US to Indonesia. And so we thought, maybe this is real. So we started with that as a business. We started with the US-Indonesia corridor, but I think through the interview process, which we still do today, every new business we launch, we have a team that goes and builds new companies kind of every single month. And the first thing they do is talk to 30 customers. So we still do that to this day. And throughout that process, we learned a lot about what customers actually wanted and what they didn't, and at least for our business found out that the US was the wrong corridor for us, that it was going to be a more Asian corridor between Asia, and that's what we got into YC with.
Love it. So one of the examples I use in my classes is when you originally had a problem about remote workers, well, not remote workers, but workers who were from other countries, because Moses grew up in Australia before coming to Haas, and he would see these long lines of folks trying to send back payments, and his initial thought was, hey, that's a real problem that there's such a long line for these people. But what happened when you actually talked to them?
Yeah, we had these three assumptions. We had one, that it's expensive to move money across the world; two, that people didn't want to be in these long lines, and three, that people were willing to use a mobile phone to send money. All three were wrong. So when we went to Hong Kong and I hung out with these domestic workers, these Indonesians working, we stood in line with them and just talked to them about their day. But a few things came out which are interesting. These domestic workers are considered second-class citizens. They're kind of pushed into the public parks on a Sunday, which is where they're allowed to hang out. Or literally, I sat with them at the main train station just on the floor in the hallway. But standing in line was this opportunity where you could stand in the air conditioning at a mall because you're a customer. So it was actually this like uplifting moment in the day for them, not one where they were second-class citizen. And it was just little things like that, here we are sitting looking at a World Bank report being like, oh, this is terrible. But the actual psychology for someone on the ground was pretty different once you went and spoke to them. And so once we learnt how wrong we were, coming from our ivory tower, the other two we quickly found out were wrong, and then we pivoted.
Love it. That's what we call a teachable moment. So I
Yes.
always have you to thank for that. So tell us about when you first came. So you were with BCG, living the highfalutin consulting lifestyle.
The baking appendix slides.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Before coming to Haas, what sort of got you interested in entrepreneurship? Did you always know you wanted to do it, or how did that manifest itself?
Yeah, I come from a line of entrepreneurs. My grandfather's first job was gathering sticks and selling them in the marketplace for firewood. He then got a jewelry apprenticeship and then built a fairly large jewelry business, enough to send 11 kids to universities overseas. So he kind of changed the course of history. Grandfather on the other side, mix of kind of janitor and then government worker, taught himself the stock market, and then immigrated to Canada, and invested his whole life, and that's how he lived. So there's very kind of entrepreneurial style people, independent people. So I had that growing up. My dad was an accidental entrepreneur. I always wanted to go build my own thing. And then BCG confirmed that because kind of one of my cases, I was out-politicked by someone who's amazing at politics. She was amazing. And like at first I was really frustrated because I'm not good at it. But by the end I was just so in awe at how like every situation, good or bad, ended up to her advantage. So I swore to myself I'd go build my own, and I swore to myself when I did, I'd do my best to make sure that those kinds of actions would never work. Some of the reasons for entrepreneurship.
I love it. And I've found that too with, more introverted people, folks like us who don't love being in the spotlight, gravitate towards entrepreneurship versus corporate culture. So yeah, that's really interesting about your BCG experience. So when you first came to Haas, how did you avoid kind of entrepreneurship ecosystem meltdown and overwhelm? Because we have a lot of new students in here, and the first question is like, oh my God, there's so much stuff to do. What do I do? How did you process that?
I got lots of advice from faculty and then alums, and they said that I broke it into 3 buckets. On the academic side, there were courses that were really helpful, Entrepreneurship 1A, courses that don't exist anymore, but I was able to really get good people who go build a business with. So that was academic. Then the co-curricular, I knew as an international, I didn't know anyone, and I heard about this networking thing that Americans do, but had no idea how to do it. And so I figured launch was this fail-safe way for a introverted Australian Asian dude to be forced to have to go to speak to smart people. And so that was a lot of the co-curricular side, was get involved in hackathons, do things my first year. And then the third bucket was then use the Berkeley kind of halo effect to advantage. And so I learned, one, I wanted to find co-founders, and if you're looking for technical co-founders, you're hard-pressed to find a better place. Deep tech, software, whatever you want kind of exists on campus. So I spent a lot of time outside, in my case at Soda Hall, doing events there, meeting people there, and I did enough of information systems undergrad to, if you only talk to me for 5 minutes, which is all you need to talk to before an event, I can sound like a computer science person. And then I also realized, once I understood this networking thing, this valley is filled with the #1 alumni school is Berkeley. So it's filled with people who are willing to talk to you if you just put Berkeley in the subject line and student needs help. So they were very open to chatting. So those were 3 buckets, and once I had those, that helped me. One, it fits nicely into, is anyone ex-consulting? It fits nicely into my 3 buckets that you need for consulting. And then gave me kind of a framework to work through. I could push on all those 3 fronts.
Cool. I want to drill down on something that still comes up a lot. This problem has not been solved since you were here, but how do you meet engineers? What are some behaviors and tactics that you use that you found to be effective? Because you did it really well. You met those top people. You did the hackathons. I don't know if you formed a team before you did the hackathon or if you just showed up. Tell us.
Yeah, I did everything I could. One of the things I realized quickly is they have some really cool events at Soda Hall. For example, Max Levchkin from a firm just showed up and did a small talk. But they're even more introverted than us, so I got to actually ask them questions, which is kind of cool. Whereas in this crowd, you guys would all ask questions before I would. So literally hanging out there, going to the events, meeting people, and I think something I've noticed compared to some of my peers who went to those events, the attitude was, I've got this great idea for this app. Can you come build it for me? Whereas the advice I was told is, one, I understood these people are probably smarter than me because it's probably harder to get into soda hall than here. And then two, I think if you go in with a kind of sense of equality or humility, that probably helps. And so to me, the co-founder, the person you get married to in that sense, was probably more important than the idea. YC companies, I think within the first year, like 30 to 40% of YC companies pivot. So your idea doesn't really matter. It's probably really bad. But the co-founders are really hard to split with. That's pretty painful. So I really focus on that. But I'm still a business student, so I had a spreadsheet of 45 names of people I met who I thought, these might be cool to do a startup with. And then I thought, what's the fastest way to go learn what it's like to work with these people? And I figured these hackathons were the right way. I did a lot of like these 24-hour overnight hackathons because you get really stressed, you get sleep deprived, and then you really see what people are like. So I thought that was a great way, and once we started winning a few, I did a couple more tests about commitment, and then it was very clear who was committed and who wasn't, and then we ran.
I love that as a mindset and a framework, humility, optimizing kind of the search, and sometimes just showing up and dealing with people. So very cool. All right, so tell us about YC. Let's fast forward to after you graduated. You did YC that summer, right?
Yeah.
Tell us about that experience and when you think the optimal time for companies to go through it, because people are like, I've got a pitch deck, I want to go to YC, and trying to convince them that there's a right time to do it. I would love your thoughts.
It's harder now than back then. Back then we had 6,000 applications. This last batch was told 15,000 applications.
Wow.
There's more people per batch, so I guess the percentage take rate is actually a little bit higher. But a lot of that's now international, which is good for me, maybe less good depending where you come from. So it's when I talk to YC founders or people who want to be in YC, I think the right time, well, it's always as soon as they'll let you in. But if you think from YC's perspective, they get the choice of the 15,000 probably best companies in the world applying. And you have, like, I'm coming from Indonesia, so the average YC application I see has someone launching and has thousands of users or tens of thousands of users if it's consumer, if it's B2B, hundreds of business customers. And then I'll get a Berkeley YC application and they've like spoken to 30 people and they're hoping to get in. And I appreciate the fervor and the confidence, but YC has choices. So I think it's on average harder. Now some of those will get in. We also got in pretty much at idea stage. We'd only launched 2 or 3 weeks before. But the YC kind of number is 30% month on month, which is about 7% week on week growth. So I say to everyone that I help, show that traction in some way. So it can be 3 weeks or 4 weeks of traction, but show that traction. And then now they're doing interesting things like, I guess so many people have given this advice, so people are kind of hacking growth so that by the application they have it. So I just got pinged by someone trying to get in, and now they're doing, we won't interview yet, but give us the next month of information. So you have to kind of keep showing that you can maintain this growth. So yeah, 7% week on week, 30% month on month. We have it on T-shirts. It's like, and now at Xendit, that's what we do. Any experiment that we launch, if it doesn't grow 30% month on month for the first 18 months, we cut the project. But we've launched kind of 15 products at this point that grow at that pace. So there is a system to it.
Yep. And I love those metrics. We tell people that all the time, but they're always the hopers and the dreamers who want to, just defy gravity and go for it. What would you say to them?
I say apply because I think rejection's a great thing. And then number 2, I don't know if this is, someone will have to fact check me, but I think 30% of YC companies have applied once or twice before. So now, because YC can wait, they're starting to wait and see that traction over time and then letting people in. And then within a batch, at least my time was like 1/3 kind of new ideas like us, really didn't know what we're doing. 1/3 who had some traction, 1/3 who were like funded already. I think now that's probably more and more funded because 1, it's this environment, and 2, they've just got more time to let companies grow before they let them in.
Cool. Yeah, I really like that idea that they're keeping up with people after the application process. That's very cool. So I just want to drill into a little bit about your actual experience there, because you had some pretty profound insights and some major pivots. Yours just wasn't a linear trajectory of happiness and joy.
No, we were the black sheep for a while. We didn't grow for the first, it's a 3-month program, so in the first 6 weeks, which is half of it, we didn't grow at all. So 3 things YC did for us, and then I'll talk through the pivots. First is the pressure cooker. When you walk into this room and it's people who think they're smart and actually sometimes are. It's this massive pressure cooker where people are growing really quickly. I compared myself to the other Aussies, and there was another company growing profits 20% month on month, which was crazy to me. They made compliance software that government used. Amazing business to print money. Another company was Flirty, which was the first commercial drone delivery company in the world. And they were a late admission into YC. And I'm fairly sure that late admissions means you're so smart that, or so good, they're like, all right, come in anyway. And they had announced the week that they joined, they announced that they'd won like a commercial pilot with NASA or something. So these were the other Aussies I was competing with.
Slackers.
Yeah, and we were trying to give away an app for free to move money for free, and no one would use it. So that was pretty embarrassing. And for 6 weeks, our life was like that. I was in Asia, in Hong Kong, trying to get people to use this silly application, and no one would. 6 weeks in, I came back to Mountain View, and I remember meeting Justin Khan. Justin Khan is the founder of Twitch, sold for $1 billion to Amazon, also a bit of a startup personality. But I remember sitting with him and saying, I guess we failed, we suck, we know we suck. The other 2 partners kind of weren't talking to us at that point, we were just written off. And 12 minutes in, he said, why don't you guys build Venmo? Well, we gave him a few options, and Venmo for Indonesia was one of them. And he said, why don't you do Venmo for Indonesia? Launch within a week, see what you can do. And that was life-changing in that 6 weeks later we had 16,000 users, and we raised our seed. So really pivotal advice at the right point in time, which is my second point. So 1, pressure cooker. 2, getting advice from people who built billion-dollar companies and failed a few times, and failed most recently, but are humble about that. Amazing advice. Compared to every VC who are like, ex-bankers don't know anything about real life. Ex-consultants, even worse, because they think they know. Like, terrible people to get advice from. Real operators who built billion-dollar businesses, amazing people to hear advice from, and who failed a few times. So that's a second. The third thing that YC I think did really well is the FOMO and beauty that is Demo Day. The ability for you to be the hottest startup in Silicon Valley or around the world for one day is amazing. We were the first Indonesian kind of focused business into YC. And I remember speaking to a celebrity investor who asked me if Indonesia was in Bali, which is fine. I don't expect Americans to know where that is because it's just not relevant. But it just showed how different 2015 was versus now that we have something like 10 unicorns out of Southeast Asia. Right now, I was just on Sand Hill Road earlier today. Everyone wants to be in Southeast Asia. Indonesia's the 4th largest country on earth, so we have the population to back up. We have the macros to back this up. So now it's like Latin America, Southeast Asia, hells yeah, let's throw money. But back then it wasn't that. So the YC badge gave us the license to go speak to some of the top investors in Silicon Valley who otherwise would never speak to a quiet Southeast Asian Indonesian startup.
Well, who's incredibly humble, but who delivers the goods. So that raises an interesting question. If you are an international student and you have a startup, do you test it here and then hope to move to your home market? What would be your advice on that? Because you just went all in.
I'd say raise money here, but build at home. Yeah. For those of you who are international, most developing markets right now are blowing up. My African friends are getting acquired and getting invested. Latin America, if you're from Latin America, you guys are so lucky. So much money is going down there. And then if you're Southeast Asian, we have we have tons of money coming. We're printing unicorns every week in Southeast Asia. Latin America, I think it's like every day you guys have something. So it's so good to not be from America right now. It wasn't like that in 2015. So now's the time to go build businesses. And we also have, I think our markets are more complex in that 2015 the world was FANG, Stripe is going to win everything. Americans are going to win everything. Now 2020, I speak to investors who are like, we've decided that no matter, like, local network effects are stronger than global ones. Kind of 2015 to that time, global network effects were assumed to win, and it was, and there's definitely that in consumer and social media. But now, local network effects are starting to take over and be more dominant and survive. In which case, the theses being drawn up are, hey, this thing that worked in Europe or US or China or India, could it also work in LATAM or Africa or Southeast Asia or wherever you come from? And that's an amazing opportunity.
Well, that raises another interesting point. You have recently expanded into the Philippines, and from what I understand, you hired a lot of local staff to help manage that versus just have the mothership direct. Tell us about that and how you made the decision.
Yeah, for those of you who are from developing markets, you'll understand this, but it's really hard to come into our countries and be foreign and win. I think that's been proven time and time. Like, Americans going to China didn't work, Chinese coming to other parts of the world didn't work. Like, I think superpowers are becoming more humble about what they're able to achieve. And so we knew that, zero licenses have been given to foreigners in Indonesia, so it's really hard to come in as a foreigner. So we had no pretense that we could go to Vietnam and win a war, even with unlimited money, because that's been proven to not work before. We had no pretense that we can do things in other markets unless we partner with local, be local. And so that was our approach. We made sure that before we entered, we spent a year talking to regulators, big families, the powers that matter, to make sure that we're clear to run, to understand the power dynamics. The equivalent here would be like FANG, but over there, who the powers that be, how those markets work, and make sure that when we enter, we're cleared to enter. And so it was probably a year's worth of prep, and it's slower. I think our investors were slower than a consumer launch, like an Uber style, but Uber kind of had to sell. So we decided, no, we want to set up ribs and stay. It actually works, I think. I think it's a year and a half since we launched. I think we'll be the biggest in Philippines within kind of 6 months. So it'll be kind of a total of a year and a half. We go from zero to being the biggest payments company. So Asian style works for Asia.
Yep, there you go. So how do you keep, when all this is going on around you, how have you changed your kind of mindset and your, just internal outlook? How do you keep balanced and focused?
Oh, that's a big question.
I know.
The deep questions. How do I keep focused?
Well, and not overwhelmed, because there's just so many things going on, and attention, you can't attend to everything.
Yeah, there's a few frameworks that are helpful. I asked Justin Kahn when we finished YC, what should I do as a founder? And he said, ask yourself one simple question every week, and then a few years later every month, and a few years later every year. What is stopping me from growing 50% next week? And fix that. And that is extremely focusing, because you get one thing to work on. And now it's kind of, I don't think we're going to die next week or die in the next quarter, so for me now it's next year or 2 years. What's going to kill us a year from now, or what's stopping us from growing? And then fix that. Brian Chesky, Airbnb, has this idea, I think it's in one of his blog posts, as a founder or a senior leader, when you see problems, ask yourself not just the problem to fix, but what is the one thing that you can do that fixes many problems at once, or that problem at scale so it never happens again, which I think is a very interesting question. For example, it may mean firing someone or hiring someone, or whole new processes that you have to put in. It's a much harder question. But if you change one thing and it changes the culture of that particular organization, that may be the right thing to do. So that brings, I think, some of these, and then if all else fails, a BCG 2x2 of like whatever's highest impact, lowest cost, I'm going to do that. So somewhere between those frameworks are a good set of prioritization for what to do. But I found Justin Kahn's answer extremely clear and actionable.
That's great. I'm stealing that. So, okay, so just a couple more questions for me, and then we'll open it up. So get your questions ready, everybody. So thinking back to your time at YC, and even back to launch, what are the biggest mistakes that you see early stage companies making, or moving from an idea, pre-product market fit, and then product market fit to scaling? Let's just put things in those two buckets.
Yeah. So I'll define product market fit the way Justin Kahn defined it when I asked him when we didn't have it. And he said, you'll know it because you'll know it. I was like, that doesn't help me, Justin. That's like the most platitudinal advice, which is, if you ever watch him, that's how he talks. But he was like, it's like drinking from a fire hose. You can't keep up with the demand. I was like, that's something I can measure. So if that's the definition, then pre-product market fit, I think the biggest mistake I see is companies don't launch early enough. And YC, Paul Graham has lots of things about this. Michael Siebel, now the CEO of YC, talks about this. But we do our 30 interviews, and then we like play around, and we're never ready, and the product isn't quite there. Whereas at a soda hall event, you could sign up for YC office hours because they would go there, they wouldn't come here. Rhonda will work on that. But we got office hours with Kevin Howe, and we told him about our product, and he said, why don't you launch tomorrow? And had all these really smart reasons. We weren't ready, this user interface wasn't ready, whatever. He's like, screw that, launch tomorrow. And so he's like, come back to me in 2 weeks. Launch tomorrow, come back in 2 weeks, and tell me what your progress is. And I was like, all right, let's do it. So we launched the next day. It was rubbish. We worked all night. But we launched, and then we got traction. And then 2 weeks later, I was able to say, hey, we launched. We had like, I don't know, $5,000 of remittances, and now we had 7. So whatever percentage that is, 40% week-on-week growth. And he was like, ping me in 2 weeks again. Tell me your progress. And so we were kind of forced. We were so lucky to be coached by him in this respect. And then 4 weeks, then we applied to YC with this kind of like 30% week-on-week growth from a very small base. But that's number one, is like, we have all good reasons why we shouldn't launch. And Kevin Howe and Justin comes like, launch a whole app in a week. It takes longer than a week. Like most sprints are like 1 week, let alone like build, QA, everything, launch a whole new app in a week. It was so bad, but it worked. So that's probably pre-product market fit.
Yep.
It's like you got to keep building product until, and then product market fit comes from definitely in consumer, that referral line, or it's B2B referrals too. For the first 2 years, once we pivoted to Stripe, the first 6 months, 9 months was like pure pain of selling, getting to people. But then the 2 years after that, so kind of first 2.5, 3 years, we had 3 salespeople, and all they did was pick up the phone because we had customers telling their friends to use us. So we didn't do any outbound sales. And and all we did every day was like wake up and find which part of the system is broken and fix that. And then we realized this is what he meant, drinking from a fire hose. Like, we had so many APIs calls coming through that every day a different part of our system broke. People were like, we're burning out. I was like, I can't do anything except we're gonna invent some more candle till you burn out more, because we have to keep dying until this thing gets fixed. And so for a year we were just fighting fires because we were just drinking from the fire hose. Yeah,
but you're learning along the way, and I think, my thinking has evolved some in part because of your experience with Xendit. We used to tell way back in 2015, we would tell students, don't rate the first line of code until you've done 100 customer discovery interviews. Well, around 30 interviews is when you really start to learn whether there's some there or not. So go out, create something, and test it. That, instead of a minimum viable product, have a minimum viable test. And I think that's really, what you're doing. You just launch something and you learn and you just keep iterating.
And we do that to this day.
Yeah.
We do our 30. If I just get one customer bite, we actually like to make manual products, so that is my analogy is like, we'll have a vending machine that looks nice, but I'll sit inside and move the bag of chips around. So we'll do that, and we'll just get tests as soon as we can out to market. If we get one bite, we'll get that bite, but we want that person to refer someone else.
Love it. Well, that was going to be my next question about what is your success criteria for these experiments that you're running? You alluded to that a little bit before.
Yeah, so we have something we call the experiments frameworks. 3 months, a small team, 2 or 3, typically one business, one dev. They have to launch something. It has to grow 7% week on week. It can start from 1. That's fine. So the next week has to be 2. Next week has to be 3. But it just has to grow 7% week on week. And if it doesn't after 3 months or 6 months, we cut it depending on the project. But what it means, and then the other rule is 30 interviews before you can, say truly no. I was just doing one where I actually only discovered the problem. We were just doing a new business. The 25th interview was the one where I finally, I think, heard the problem, the real problem statement that we can solve. And then now that I know the right questions to ask, we're now doing another 30 on top of that because I failed my first 25 really. And now we're like, oh yeah, this is a problem. So first 25, like, no, it's not a problem, it's fine. And then now that we've figured out from one, we're now opening up. But we'll write lines of code and that'll be done. The experiments devs can do it in a week. So they'll get something out.
So many things I love about that. A, you're still doing customer discovery. B, you don't always get it right, even with asking the questions to get insights versus answers. And C, that you've applied this to your whole organization. That's awesome. Wow. Yeah. Okay, one more question for me, and then we'll open it up to students. I just want to go back to, we talked about the biggest mistakes you see up to product market fit. How about with teams that have product market fit and then are starting to scale? What are the big kind of barriers there that you see?
I haven't coached that many companies at that stage, so I'll talk about our mistakes. Yeah. I think the biggest mistakes for us was hiring mistakes. We are a bunch of we think we're underdogs, I think we are. And we don't have a bunch of, BCG is pretty nice. So I guess some of us have nice resumes, but most of us don't. And so when we got funded and kind of product market fit, we're like, sweet, let's hire expensive people that resumes are really nice and they've IPO'd before and they look way better than us on paper. I would happily work for them. And so we hired a few, someone who'd done product and at a company that then IPO'd. He led the product team there, for example. But what we realized was, what we didn't take into account was we built this whole culture and organization around humility, around getting shit done rather than just talking about it. And so some of these really pretty resumes didn't actually work in our context at all. If there's lots of companies where if you go and talk and build beautiful slides, that's called value. Whereas for us, we can give 2 shits about the slides. And YC warned us about this and they said it was okay. YC said, hey, you will probably hire your first group of execs and then fire them all, and then you'll hire again and maybe you'll get it right. So we were like, nah, we're smarter than that. Nope, definitely not. So we hired a first group of execs, people with really nice resumes, MBAs and such, and then fired them all. We're better now.
I love it. Great. Okay, let's open it up for your questions. All right, Matt.
Yeah, so you had 3 buckets or 3 fronts you worked on. What were those again?
Whilst at Berkeley?
Yes.
Academics, co-curricular, and then just the halo effect of Berkeley, leveraging the fact that the #1 alumni school for people in the Valley is Berkeley.
Matt's a brand new MBA student. He has been one of our
cool.
eager beavers for entrepreneurship.
Yeah, once someone taught me how this American networking thing was, I spent every week, because you only have class 3 or 4 days, at least in second year, you can kind of compress them. So I'd spend 4 days a week down in the Valley just meeting people, and I just found that just using the Berkeley name helped so much, and people would meet me. But I met people from doing the coolest things, from cars to space to AI to whatever, and they were willing to meet because I was just a lowly student.
There you go. Play the card shamelessly, people. Pro tip. All right. Other questions? Yes, go ahead.
Hi, Moses. My name is James. Thanks
Hey,
for coming
James.
today. So you mentioned people are more important than the first idea you're coming up with. I'm curious on how after you've assembled a group, right, and then you guys failed once, you're struggling. How did you do anything to sort of keep the team still tight and keep the synergy there? And did people hesitate or doubt? How did you handle it?
Yeah, good question. The first pivot was easy because we were all in YC, and so we were going to go down together. And my co-founder was highly committed to this. He quit his old job and got a job in a Bitcoin, well, no, it was Ripple, but a kind of crypto company so that we would have crypto credentials when we raised. He then, when we became Indonesia only, we'd agreed. The four founders, for equity and for rules of how we would make decisions, we had all these questions that we knew were difficult, but we'd been given advice, go sort it out. So we agreed on a 1 hour slot at one of the meeting rooms here. We'd go in and argue all of that stuff out, and we would say we can argue whatever we want, be as loud as we want, but we'll make decisions, and after that we'll never talk about it again. And so that's what we did, and we've never talked about it again. Everyone's happy with the result,
Wow.
but we've abided by those rules, which have made it, I think, it's like you have the hard conversation up front versus like slide it under the rug. Sorry, that wasn't your question. What was the question?
No, but I love that. That's another nugget.
I think that actually helped. I think that sounds like there was never sort of very different directions that you guys wanted to go for.
Oh, it's keeping the team together. Yeah.
Keeping the team together.
So founders was easy because like we'd sorted all this stuff out.
Okay.
When we had like a team of 20, I think that was different. And we had these like fresh grads who believed in this Venmo idea, and then we're like, just kidding. And we had 250,000 users, so like it was going fine by vanity metrics, but I just didn't think it was a real business. And so we said, we're going to do an experiment. We're going to compete. Out of the 20 of us, 18 chose to work on a more consumer-facing product. And then me and Bo, my co-founder, chose to work on this B2B thing. And we said, we'll give it 1 month. 1 month, whoever has the most traction, that's what we do. Fair way of making decisions. And in that month, Bo and I got more traction, like probably double the traction than the consumer thing had.
Sure.
So we're able to prove through data that this was the right call. And then it was easy. It was like, folks, if you don't be if you love consumer, that's totally cool. Like you signed on for that. So if this is now no longer your mission, we're not on Earth very long. Good, live your life. But everyone stayed and said, all right, screw it, let's go build infrastructure now for our country. And it's like not as direct maybe, but I think one of my favorite stories on infrastructure is I landed in Jakarta, and Jakarta is pretty terrible traffic, but we passed 8 different billboards, and all 8 were our customers, and all 8 were unicorns. And that was really cool to say, hey, look at these industries or people that we've helped enable because of what we do.
That is so deeply satisfying. Wow. Well, that was going to be a question for me. Do you ever take time just to soak it in? I mean, even if it's just 30 seconds and then you get back to it,
My wife pushes me to do that a little bit. She's very good at. She knows me well.
What's her name? Joy.
Her name is Joy.
Yeah.
She's very good at her name. But the moments I enjoy the most, there was one where there's maybe a few stories if I'm allowed to tell. Tell me when you guys get bored. There was a story where I'll call it from them to us. So we had someone who was 2 years as a fresh grad, and I was with him in a one-on-one, and he said, hey, I finally realized that it's no longer them, it's us. And I was like, what do you mean? And he said, I used to think they make fast-growing startups, and I now realize that I can make a fast-growing startup. I was like, that's cool. That was pretty cool. And there's a group of people who their lives have changed forever because, one, this mindset, and two, simple things like my investors tell me that I'm probably one of the lowest equity holders as a founder compared to other founders. But I kind of don't care because I'm like, okay, if we're $1 billion, this is 2015 before we were $1 billion, but if we're $1 billion, there's going to be plenty of money.
Yeah.
I'm going to be fine. But if I can change the lives of my people in Indonesia and Philippines, that changes everything, not just them, the next generation. So, fuck it. I don't need extra millions. All I'm going to do is work more anyway because I love what I do. So we give more equity. And so watching these people who do secondaries and in 1 year they get their annual salary and there's not even selling, X% of what they have.
Wow.
And that's life-changing. Another example is where we attract a lot of single mums because I'll say there's some cultural things, like we worry about rights and things here, which I think is good, but over there we're worrying about like very basic rights. But I think the society, for various reasons, is really unfair towards single moms. And so we have flexible culture, we have healthcare, we have ways to make sure that kids can stay in school and they can get promoted, despite being a single mom. And so single mom come and say, hey, I've never felt more loved than in this company, in this way. So there's moments like this where these are the ones that matter way more than $1 billion is whatever, There's
Yeah.
$1 billion company every day.
I love that you talk about those instead of, when we were getting our first big check. No, that's very you. I love that. That's so cool. All right. Other questions? Let's take here and then here and then here. So 1, 2, 3. Yeah, you're on.
Yeah. Thank you for coming, Moshe. Really appreciate the talk. I think I have a question, I guess, just for getting started in building either testing or product quickly. Like, how do I build that skill set so we can actually start making things happen?
How to build the skill set of launching quickly? I don't have a good answer except practice. We continuously run a very simple set of that framework. We just talk to 30 people. We launch as soon as we think we have something. It's as manual as possible. Even at Berkeley, the front end I coded, but back end it was just like the actual back end was just me doing stuff manually. And then we see if we can get people to use it. If we can't get people to use it, then it won't grow, and we cut it. It's not more complicated than that, at least in our world. Maybe there's fancier things other people can say to do, but that's all we do.
I'm still contemplating you inside the vending machine. I love that. That's going to stick in my head. I love it. Okay, who is our next question? Right here. Yeah.
Hey, thanks for doing the session. So I got rejected by YC once, but after listening to you, I think I'll apply again.
Definitely apply again.
Yeah. My question to you is, during Haas, what are the activities that you did? And can you just walk us maybe briefly of how you spent the 2 years at Haas and how did that channelize your entrepreneurial journey?
Okay, so I'll talk through those 3 buckets. So first year, academics is Entrepreneurship 1A still on, right? So Entrepreneurship 1A, no?
I'm not sure that's what it's called.
So
but, yeah.
those, I think...
is that Toby's class?
Toby's and Rob's class? What does that become?
Yeah, it's something else now. Yeah.
So anything that sounded entrepreneurship, there was like 3 or 4 classes that I did. There's another class with a few other like entrepreneurs who'd done stuff that is no longer, it didn't exist the next year. So on the academic side, I was like anything I could. And I conscripted like all my friends. When we did this unicorn announcement, I just had remembered how many, because so many Berkeley people wrote in and said, congrats, and like remember that time. I was like, I do remember that time. Like whatever project it was, like econ, we turned it into Xendit. It was everything, operations, everything we could, we turned it into Xendit. So I'm very thankful to the people who let me kind of play. So that was on the academic side. On the co-curricular, it was in first year, launch I think was all I could handle. It was the first year that we were trying to run this very new format. And it was super fun, but it took a lot of time. The second year then was, we did launch, we did GSVC, we did a bunch of other competitions, we went through Skydeck, we got NSF, ICOR, anything that like, hey, we can spin this to be related, we'll do it. So that's, and then the hackathons. So that was how we used. The third part, is then just the Berkeley halo effect was just. I'm half Indonesian, but I never lived in Indonesia before. And my family in Indonesia are like, I don't know, they're very different. I guess like they couldn't help me in this world. We're not from money. And so I cold emailed 100 Indonesian sounding names at Berkeley. There's a Berkeley Indonesian Students Association. It's a Southeast Asian Studies building. Turns out some of them were wrong because they were Filipino, but that's okay. I'm happy to make mistakes. And so I emailed 100. 4 replied, and I met 4 for coffee. 1 introduced me to his roommate, so another 2, so now 6 people. 1 introduced me to his dad, and then his dad when I flew to Indonesia, introduced me to a whole bunch of people.
Wow.
And Berkeley has actually a really good recall rate in Indonesia. I was in a taxi once and I said, I go to school in the US, and they said, oh, Berkeley.
No way.
Versus anywhere else. And why? Because the dictator in the US government had a good deal where all the future cabinet ministers would go through the econ PhD department here. So we'll take the silver lining. Past is the past. But that was the Berkeley recall factor. And so 100 cold emails. And so
I love it, but I love your scrappiness. That's what you have to do to get it done. You just got to be fearless in like getting out there and getting those connections. I love it.
Yeah, I figured I wasn't smart enough for anything fancy, so I just did the basics.
No, but that's how you do it. I don't think there's a workaround. Anyway, no, that's awesome. Okay, question here.
Apa kabar?
Hi.
How do you get to the government policies there? Indonesia is very,
Yeah, Asia is hard.
They're not hard, but it's complicated.
Yes,
you
complicated.
gotta have a different way to get in.
Yeah.
Because as you can see, last year there's a lot with the lockdown and everything. There's more human transfer going on because people from Hong Kong gonna come back, and they probably use more of the service. You say like, well, how do you control the security of it? As you can see, there's a lot of news about fake news going through. How do you deal with this?
Yeah, great questions. Hard questions. So on the regulatory front, I have to sign Foreign Corrupt Practices Act as a U.S. U.S. investors. So it means I'm limited in what I can do compared to some of our competitors. So for example, it takes us 4 years to get a payments license versus 3 months for some of my friends. So we have to approach things in a very different way. But I think our belief was that if we do things for the right way for long enough, and we play the long-term game, that it has staying power. We have no choice but to believe that. So our approach was, okay, there's certain things that the government cares about. There's policies they want to make. They want to be startup friendly. They want SMEs to do well. They want the next kind of 50 million Indonesian businesses to rise. They want 10 unicorns by 2020. So all these things that they cared about. And so over time, Asia's all about trust and face-to-face trust. So it took plenty of time, but it was time to say, hey, we're not going to run away. We're not going to do an Uber. We're not going to drop 50 million and peace out. We're here to stay. We're local enough to know how to play the game. And staying around long enough helped, and building trust helped. Lots of coffees, lots of dinners, lots of these things, because that's our only lever. We can't pull the levers others can. But I think eventually, it was way longer than some of our friends. Eventually, it worked. And now we've learned some of that playbook. I think for Philippines, for example, we spent a lot of time before we arrived doing things, setting the foundations. I think for those of you who are from international markets and where this matters, the other big part is the power dynamics of at least in Indonesia, the families that matter, the big families, conglomerates that control everything. In certain countries, it's the government that controls everything. Or it's politics. So whatever those power dynamics be, understanding who could be an ally and can invest and therefore be an ally in the company, and who isn't, and what's the right dynamic. So that's a vague answer, because I don't think there's a concrete answer for every specific situation. But I think that's a framework for us, is we're happy to be patient and do things like an Asian enough way and build that relationship. Your second question is around security. Security is painful. The framework, the security guys deal with that, so I know less. But the framework is one, we have to meet a whole bunch of rules, PCI DSS, ISO. There's a whole bunch of ISO stuff we can talk about. So standards we need to meet. Beyond that, Indonesians love hacking and defrauding. I think Zuck came to Indonesia and he actually went to this second-tier city because there's so many hackers there to like recruit them for Facebook because they're so good at hacking. So we get the joys of that every single day. And so we have in-house hackers, we have outside pen testers. We got ransomware a long time ago once, so we've been through some of this, and I think we have something like 13 attempts a second or something. That's the latest report from my team. Probes a second against our various kind of firewalls or systems. So it's intense. It's really real, but we have a team of people who dedicated to it, and they can speak smarter. But that's what I see in these reports of just people trying to hack us all the time. There's social engineering, there's phishing, there's corporate espionage, there's everything. Asia's the Wild West.
How do you keep your head from exploding when you read like those reports? I mean, you seem very, even keel about it now, but
I know. I feel like this is my purpose. I was lucky to be born in I don't get too excited when we do well. I don't get too excited or sad when we do badly. So I think the even keel is like, if I needed to stress, there's so many things I could stress about. So changing diapers is more stressful now.
there you go. I love it because you have two little ones.
Yeah, 1 year, 9 months, and a 4 months. So they're both boys, and if any of you have kids, I don't know, but boys can really projectile.
Yeah.
So it's like
They have lots of energy.
defense.
Oh yeah. Stay strong, Moses. Stay strong. Okay, we've got time for like one more question, Aaron, and then Denching. Then we'll wrap up with you. All right.
Thank you for your time. I'm wondering if you can speak about fundraising and investment, picking the right investors, just managing that process and going through it right now.
Can we go past 7? Or?
Yeah.
Those are big topics. I'll tell you a fun story if you'll let me. On the fundraising, this is how Rob Chandra, who used to teach here before he unfortunately passed, he taught us this way of raising money. So you divide your investors into 3 tiers: tier 3, tier 2, tier 1. Tier 1s would be like Excel, Kleiner Perkins. Tier 3s would be idiots like me if I wanted to invest. And so you have these 3 different tiers. In tier 3, you say, all right, let's talk next week. Your tier 2 say, let's talk a month from now. And your tier 1s, you say, let's talk 3 months from now. And so you go to your tier 3s and you say, hey, we're raising 600,000. We have 300,000 from friends and family. So we what you're implying is we only really need one of you because this tier 3 will write on average a $300,000 check. But I really like you because of XYZ reason. Then I go to the next person and say, I really like you because of XYZ reason. We waited a few days and then I called them. I said, hey, you know how we're fundraising? Well, actually, I need an answer from you within 24, 48 hours. If you don't, that's totally fine. That's your call, but I'll probably go with someone else. That's the scariest moment because it's a moment of truth. One person rang back and said, I'm in. So now we go to tier 2s. We said, you know how I need to talk to you in a month from now? Actually, fundraising is happening faster than I thought. Can I meet you next week? And they're like, oh, shit. So, yeah, let's meet next week. So I met them and said, oh, we're raising 1.2. We have 800 in the bank. We need 400,000 more. We're talking to other people like you, but I really like you because of XYZ. And I really like you because of XYZ. And I really like you because of XYZ. Called them a few days later and said, hey, that fundraising we're doing is actually going faster than we thought. Totally up to you, but I need an answer within 24, 48 hours. And one of them, I was at lunch in San Francisco, and he said, hey, you're holding a gun to my head. I was like, I just want to go back to operating and doing value or creative things. And he was like, all right, fuck it, I'm in. So then we called the tier 1 firms and said, you know how I'm meant to meet you 3 months from now? Where fundraising is going faster than we thought, can we meet next week? And they said, sweet, what about Tuesday? And Rob was like, never on Tuesdays, partner meetings happen Monday morning. And so they were like, what about Monday morning? I was like, Monday afternoon. I was like, super busy Monday afternoon. Monday morning. So I remember I went down to Sandy Hill Road, 7 a.m., 8 a.m., 9 a.m., 10 a.m., did 4 different meetings. 12 minutes in, Ryan Sweeney, Excel, said, I want all $2.5 million. I'll write it right now. But I want to take the whole round. and I need you to sign before I go into my partner meeting. I want to say that I've got you. Rob had said, don't accept whatever they give you in the meeting. And Ryan, I was like, can't accept it. I got to think about it. There's all the people I want to bring in. And Ryan was like, the terms will be different if you leave. It's like Shark Tank moment. But I decided to, obey or listen to Rob at that point. So I was like, can't. So I left. And I just remember like driving from the Excel's building to there's a petrol station right next door, but we just like shut our pants and we just like, I remember I looked at my hands and my hands were shaking because I was like so nervous. I get an SMS 20 minutes later from Ryan and he was like, hey, so my partners like you, we want to do the round, what do you want? And so we negotiated for about 15 minutes over SMS and this is like more money than I've ever seen in my life. And yeah, the terms were different. They were, Excel got what they wanted, we got what we wanted, we got to bring in the investors at the price we wanted, so they were better. So Rob was right, they were different. So that's fundraising. Now the meta there is FOMO, all about fear of missing out. So that process for setting meetings up, having to bring them forward, the process of starting small and then as you get oversubscribed, you say we're oversubscribed. It's all in these tactics, but it's all fear of missing out. So it works at 6 figures, and based on our recent announcement, it works at 9 figures too. So
I love it, play on playa. But you had something that people wanted. What advice would you give to people who may not be in that same situation? They just think, oh, I need to hire some engineers, I need to raise. Please disabuse them of that notion.
It's going to be a real tough time fundraising. I think traction will speak louder than like anything else. So yep. I wouldn't raise without the traction. We've learned that the hard way too. We've thought about going to market when we didn't have the traction we needed, and the terms are just terrible. So the options are bad. Whereas when you have traction, all these things are better. So you don't need another engineer period to learn to code. When we needed a front end, we didn't have one. I taught myself over the weekend and built a very terrible front end.
But you did it. No, I love it. Traction, yeah, that's a minimum. Love it. Okay, Denqing, bring us home.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time. I have a question. So when you have your first customer, they ask your pricing. So how did you make that price for your first customer?
Great question. I'm the worst on this because I didn't take Ted. I think he moved to Singapore, but one of the professors used to run this excellent pricing class that got rave reviews, and I didn't do it. So I'm bad at pricing. What I did was the first customer I gave it away for free because it was really bad. That was the only way they were going to stay. And then the way I do it now is I just start high and we negotiate, and wherever we end up, next one I start a little bit higher and see, and at some point we find elasticity of demand by failing. So I don't have a good answer for you except trial and error, hopefully in the right direction. So.
But yeah, experiment and iterate. I love that. Cool. All right, so we have to let you go now, but thank you. Please join me in thanking Moses.